now you are going to pursue your master's degree at the Johns Hopkins School of International Studies. Welcome, Shehryar.
Thank you for having me, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always good to see you. I know we've been keeping in
Always a
touch
pleasure.
over the years, and for everybody who's zooming in, Shehyar's family and I live in the same neighborhood. I run into them sometimes when they're shopping at Spinney's, so that's always really cool. And it's great to just keep in touch with students like yourself, over the years, and still somehow be part of this journey in a very small way. My name is Peter Davos. I am the founder and head of Hale Education Group. Over the last 10 weeks, we featured primarily graduating seniors in high school, but we started the series with 2 webinars with Parth Garg and myself. Parth just finished his freshman year at Stanford University. He had studied in Abu Dhabi at Bright Rider School. And now we're going to finish this series with Shehryar, who just graduated from Johns Hopkins. So we're going to get the graduate's perspective now.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So Shehryar, everybody now, I'm sure in your, your social circle, your student community, everybody's talking about this latest, pronouncement by Trump that was issued, President Trump, 2 days ago, affecting international students, of which there are over 1.2 million in the U.S. and institutes of higher education, and of which you are one of them. So
correct.
It's to you particularly close, also to me, but I'm not a student anymore, thank God. So tell me, how did you go through the whole kind of cycle? Like, how did you process the information? How did you find out about it?
Sure.
How did you initially process it? And then after having some time to think about it and sleep on it, how do you see this kind of impacting you?
Sure, absolutely. So about 2 days ago, I was in the afternoon, I was scrolling through the Wall Street Journal, looking through new headlines. And the one that caught my eye, obviously, was the ICE headline relating to international students. So I read that, and I read the official guidelines that ICE released. And it was basically saying that if your mode of instruction is completely online, you international students have to exit the country. So first thing I did was call my parents and told them this is what's going on. Then after that, I emailed my Office of International Services and told them, asked them how does this affect me. They had also received countless of emails from other international students who had read the same news. So they've been working on it, and what we know now is that if your mode of instruction is completely online, you have to exit the country within 10 days. But from what I can see, what most universities are doing is they're figuring out workarounds around this policy.
Yes.
I believe Columbia and NYU, what they've done is they've created a 1 credit class, which is in person, but it's not really in person. It's sort of just a shell class, which international students just sign up for. Berkeley is also offering a in-person class offered by students. I'm not sure what exactly that is, but there are workarounds to this policy. For me, myself at SAIS, we're following a hybrid model, so the policy doesn't affect us yet anyway.
Right.
The main uncertainty right now is that if at any point in time your school goes into an online mode of instruction, you will have to exit the country.
Right.
But if there are workarounds around it, I don't think it's something to worry about that deeply.
It's very encouraging and comforting to hear that from you directly, because you were an international student for 4 years when you completed your undergrad. You just graduated with your bachelor's degree. Right now, you're a graduate student. So you seem to be very calm, collected, optimistic that solutions will be found. Yeah. You're not, there's been so much hysteria, right? And there's been so much panic, which is understandable when you read the headline, right?
Yeah, correct.
But then you get into the details, and then you find out exactly, I had to read it a couple times too. It's only for universities that are offering their instruction exclusively online, full stop.
That's correct. Also, chairman of ICE was on CNN last night, and like he himself just like flat out said that this is a political move to
Wow.
force force universities to reopen this fall. Like
Okay.
that's straight from the horse's mouth.
That's
It's
incredible.
yeah.
That's incredible. And this is very good context, maybe not all of the attendees or the Zoom viewers who will watch this webinar later don't understand that, right? Is that we have an election in the US that's coming up in just 4 months.
Hmm.
Trump has been very vehement in his efforts to, impose normality on all sectors of the economy, right?
Correct.
Um, this is just another strategy, in my opinion, and I can't believe that the head of ICE said this, Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the US, that the President Trump is essentially using international students as kind of a pressure point to
Hmm.
compel these universities to reopen their doors, right?
Correct.
That's what it is. And I think it's another one of these, again, like build the wall, he's going to make a grand pronouncement, gets a lot of press, gets a lot of people extremely kind of energized on both far ends of the spectrum, but then nothing happens. Yeah.
Correct. Just this morning, I was reading, like, it was in the Crimson. Harvard and MIT have sued the Department of Homeland Security as well as ICE. So
Mhm.
universities are not happy about this, and no one's staying silent about it. Like, I feel like there will be workarounds. It's
Without question. And
yeah.
another thing that I think a lot of maybe non-Americans or individuals who are not in America, right, even if they're
Hmm.
non-American, don't understand about the US is that we have 3 branches of government that act as
Correct.
checks and balances on each other. So the executive branch, which is led by the president, does not have the power to impose its will against the wishes of the other 2 branches. And we've seen this also
Correct.
with, again, the so-called Muslim ban, which also got a lot
Correct.
of attention. And, certain, nationals from 6 countries were not going to be allowed to enter into the U.S. by any, by any means or for any kind of reason. That was never implemented, right? That was
Hmm.
challenged in the courts, and that was not implemented. So it
Correct.
went into effect. So I see a similar kind of situation here where it's just, again, to energize the far right, the base there. Yeah, we don't want immigrants. And, it's going to not result in any kind of concrete, action or impact.
Correct. That's my feeling as well.
Very good. Very good. Well, moving on to more happy thoughts. How fast did these 4 years fly by for you? You just graduated. Congratulations. Just
Thank you so much.
a month ago. I mean, in your mind, and in my mind, I'm still like thinking about writing helping, edit and brainstorm and seeing you write the Hopkins supplement, right?
Correct.
Which was a long time ago, but now it's like you walked.
Exactly. So like it's the same feeling for me. I still have like the memories of applying to college and like stepping foot on campus for the first time, like all fresh in my head. It's very like peculiar to think about like that these have been 4 years. It does not feel like 4 years. It feels like a day perhaps. Like it's been a week. Everything's just flown by, and a lot of stuff has happened in these 4 years that it's hard to think about. That wow, like you've done so much. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things have been accomplished just in a period of 4 years. It's it's um it's just something bizarre to think about.
Well,
But
good. Luckily, you have another 2 years to live out
yeah.
this day. So that's good news. But if we go back, Dubai was home for you, right? This is
Correct.
where you were raised. You
Hmm.
went to British curriculum school, Dubai College. You obviously you had applied to Hopkins early decision, if I remember correctly.
That is correct.
So you then were accepted December 15th, takes the pressure off. Fantastic, to go into the holiday break knowing that you're not, under stress and finishing your essays. But, obviously a lot of the students who are Zooming in, parents, they're concerned or they're wondering about what is the transition like. So after you were accepted and after you kind of set foot on campus, what was different from what you expected? How easy was it to adapt to the US? What kind of environment did you find there? And what challenges did you face?
Sure, sure. So like I'll start off by saying that the school does a very good job at making sure that first year students are transitioned into college life very smoothly. There's a lot of resources for undergraduates to go to at Hopkins and at any other institution. Um, but like for me personally, what I found very like different coming from like a British system and into the American system is the way that classes and just the way classes were set up.
Mhm.
Because when you're in a British system, you study for the entire year and you take one exam at the end of the year, and that's your final grade. So no, anything you do in the middle of the year, that's just like a sanity check to make sure that you're understanding the material correctly. It doesn't really count for anything.
Right.
That changed completely when you attend like a US university,
Mhm.
because you have like the syllabus tells you you're gonna have two midterms, um, these many quizzes, attendance is 5%, and you're gonna have a final project, and that's gonna be your grade. So like everything you do in that class is going to count towards a final grade. And if something goes wrong, that is also going to impact your final grade.
Mhm.
So it's very hard to improve upon some classes if your initial um, if your like initial test or project does not go as planned.
Yes.
So everything counts when you're in college. It's not like high school where you just have one exam at the end. It's all you need to prepare for. You're constantly preparing for something once you're in
And
college.
you know what's interesting? What I saw at Hopkins when I was there is that, when you go to a school like Hopkins, everybody is top 5% of their graduating class, right? Top 2% average SAT score, top 1%. You come in with like a same kind of level set of achievements. Yeah, you start at the
Correct.
same starting line. But I saw that there were many students that were, let's say, smarter than me, okay, more
Hmm.
academically gifted, students that had the ability to cram successfully for exams in high school the night before. They were able to, essentially master and memorize a tremendous amount of content in a short amount of time. And that got them, straight A's sailing through high school, right?
Yeah.
Um, but at Hopkins, what I noticed with myself is that I took a very disciplined approach where I woke up the same time every day. I make sure I studied before classes. I wouldn't skip classes. I would
Yeah.
study, between them after lunch. And by the time 6 o'clock rolled around, I had studied for 4 or 5 hours. And then
Hmm.
other kids were still playing, Super Nintendo. And those
Sure.
kids really fell behind because they couldn't catch up. There's just too much work to do, like
Yeah,
on a weekly basis, like hundreds of it that you can't, no matter how smart you are, kind of cram for exams and
that's
do well.
correct. The way I would explain it is, so like for context, like I took A levels. So one A level is one college class essentially.
Mhm.
And one college class is about one semester, which is around 12, 13 weeks. So you're essentially taking one A level, which you do throughout a year in a period of like a few months.
Mhm.
So like that's like the amount of work that you upgrade to when you enter a college level class. So
Absolutely.
that those are the demands.
And another thing I think that most students aren't aware of, and parents as well, is like when you go to university, you have to complete 120 credits to graduate in 4 years,
Correct.
right? So that's 30 credits per year, typically an average of 15 credits per semester.
Mm.
Now, credits are short for credit hours, which is the number of hours you're in class per week. So if you have 15 credits, you have 15 credit hours, you have only 15 hours worth of class every week.
Yeah.
So I remember taking one class that only met once a week for 3 hours, right?
Hmm.
I remember trying to organize my schedule where I wouldn't have class on Fridays ever, right?
Yeah.
Were you kind of surprised by how relatively little class time you had and how much work you had to do outside of class on your own and in groups?
Um, that was just surprising. That was more of like a gift, I thought,
Ah,
because you sort of like get the sketch of what you need to know in your structured class,
mhm,
and then you can work like smartly outside of class. Because there are some things which you know you don't need to focus on, and there are
mm.
some things which you need to work on more. So you can create your own plan that works for you to attack the class in question. So
Give us some examples, like of a particular class or two classes, how there was a different approach for each one, and
okay.
what was more effective about each approach.
So let's see. Um, so like the two main classes which I can differentiate are your general like lecture hall classes. There's about like 50 to 200 kids sitting in that class,
Mhm,
and that type of class versus a more seminar based class.
mhm,
Um, the style of those two classes differs quite immensely. So when you're sitting in a big lecture hall, you're in those type of classes, you can sort of truly be free in a way.
mhm,
You go to class, you take notes, and then you outside of class, you can look through your notes and do the readings and figure out what you need to focus on to be successful.
mhm,
But in a more seminar-based class, which you tend to take more of once you get um, once you become an upperclassman, um, in those you're like always switched on. You always need to be focusing on everything because those are discussion based classes.
mhm.
So you're always discussing everything that you're reading. You're hitting on all the points that could be covered. You're always trying to contribute in a way you can to the class. So I personally prefer the seminar style classes because it's a more of a collaborative style approach because you're bouncing ideas of a smaller number of people. There's more interaction with your professor.
Yes,
Um, it's more for discussion rather than a class. Um,
yes,
it
more
doesn't
into
feel like a
learning
lecture.
environment.
Exactly,
Learning.
exactly.
Your seminars, how many students would be in each seminar, the seminars that you took,
Uh,
approximately?
the most I've had in a seminar is probably 12, but
Okay,
I've had classes as small as just 3 people,
three
including
people.
including myself. It'll be 3 people.
Wow. And what were your favorite seminars? Which ones did you kind of
Oh, my
greatest
favorite
idea?
seminars. I think I can tell you my favorite class was probably Islamic finance. I took that
Mhm,
this spring.
mhm.
Then let's see, ancient political thought was very interesting,
Wow.
um, and yeah, the history of capitalism. Those were my top three.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Very eclectic subject choices. And you also have an eclectic set of academic interests, if I may say so.
You can definitely say that.
So
You
tell
can
us a little
definitely
bit
say.
about how you found your way, what maybe you thought you were going to major in when you got to Hopkins, what you
Sure.
discovered there, what you minored it, and yeah, tell us how you made your way through that journey because again, there's no pressure for you to know once you get there,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So when I entered Hopkins, I was a double major. I was double majoring in international studies and classics.
Hmm.
So classics is the study of ancient Rome, ancient Greece, civilization, culture, history. Um, and based on like taking more classes, I realized that my main interest was how international studies and economics intersected.
Hmm.
So that sort of brought me on to take. So as an international studies major, you have to focus on a certain region of the world or a
Hmm.
certain policy area. I chose to focus on international economics, and that sort of led me to picking up an economics minor. Um, and based on like that sort of course load, I realized that classics was not something I really wanted to pursue as a second major, but I was still very much interested in it. So I just took it on as a minor. So by the end of my undergraduate career, I graduated with a degree in international studies with an international economics focus and a minor in classics and economics.
Two
Um,
separate minors.
yeah, two separate minors in two different areas completely.
Amazing. Amazing. And Hopkins, right, has an open curriculum, maybe not quite to the extent of Brown's, but pretty close. So it makes it easy to double major or major and minor. So
Yeah, correct.
talk a
Um,
little bit more about what that means and if that was something that really influenced you to apply there.
yeah, for sure. So, what I really liked about Hopkins was the flexibility that it gave its students to take whatever classes they really wanted to take.
Mhm,
There is some rigidity in the sense that you have to fulfill certain distribution requirements,
mhm,
and those are basically three different sections of the curriculum, which are divided into your quantitative classes, your humanities classes, and then your social science classes. And in each of those three distributions, you have to take 9 credit hours. So like three classes essentially. So you have to take 3 quantitative classes, 3 humanities classes, and 3 social studies classes. So being an international studies major and a classics minor, the humanities and the social sciences were taken care of relatively easily. And I basically took classes which I was actually interested in, and I thought that would really help my journey in the quantitative requirement. So in the quantitative requirements, I took a statistics course. I took a class on the environment and energy, and I also use my research credit to fulfill that quantitative requirement because I do research in applied economics.
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to just ask about, is because Hopkins is known for its curriculum. It's known for many things, known for its curriculum, but known for its research. #1 in the country, #1 in the world in research spending, right? Over $2.6 billion. And there are more research opportunities than there are students to fill them at Hopkins. So
That's correct.
I've had students who have conducted research from their first semester, which is amazing, but you also conducted some really cool research with a very prominent professor there. So take us through when you decided you want to pursue research, how you went about that process, how easy it was, and then who you conducted research with, and how has that journey kind of continued to the present day?
Sure. So there's a bunch of ways you can go about acquiring research opportunities depending on what you're interested in researching, and based on what your interests are. The main way that my pre-med friends would go about it was they would directly email professors who they thought were interesting, and they would submit their CV, and they would usually get a call back saying like, yeah, sure, I'll take you on as a research assistant. That's like the mainstream way that most pre-med students go about it. For people in the humanities and social sciences, that is also an option, but it's not as clear what professors are offering research positions. So there's this thing called Hour at Hopkins, HOUR, which connects students with faculty that are looking for research positions. In my case, I sort of went a different approach. I had like a lot of friends who were doing research with Professor Steve Hanke, who's an applied economics, a former Reagan White House alum, and the director of the Troubled Currencies Project at the Cato Institute. So I knew a bunch of people there. I knew what they were doing, and I told them that I was interested in doing research with them. So they made the connection with the professor. I had an interview. There's a whole process, and that's what started me doing research with Professor Hanke. And I sort of did that.
I want to know more about the process of the interview. So to talk to us more in detail.
Sure.
About it.
So like the process is the same way. It's the same as like the pre-med students. You submit your CV, and you have an interview with the professor. He asks you questions about like his basic positions in economics, his worldview. He just wants to make sure that you know what his views are, that you've done your research, you know what his research is, what he's researching, and he wants to know if you like know about how the operation works. Like that's he essentially, in order to be his research assistant, he wants to make sure that you've done your research.
Good. Sounds like a good place to start.
100%. But like that was the process essentially.
Okay, cool. And then he got back to you, said yes.
So I started doing research in the summer of my junior year. Okay. So I was doing an internship in Boston, and I was also doing this research on the side. So I'd go like it was all done remotely. So it was a good warm up to the current situation. What would happen is I go to work in the morning, come back in the afternoon at like 6 p.m. and then hop on, do my research work over the summer. And that led to a callback for the semester. And I've been doing I've been working with Professor Hankey for about a year now. So
Amazing.
I worked with him over the fall semester, the spring semester, and now I'm also doing stuff over the summer.
Very good. And what exactly are you researching? What are you helping and what specifically?
It's a lot of like there's a bunch of departments which people focus on. Some people are tracking currencies, looking at their implied inflation rates. So Professor Hankey has his own way of measuring inflation using the theory of purchasing power parity. It's sort of like
Yeah.
the Big Mac index.
And The
Uh,
Economist.
yeah, exactly. It's a very similar theory. Um, so he looks at a bunch of currencies around the world which are hyperinflating or close to hyperinflation.
Mhm.
So think Zimbabwe, Venezuela, um, South Sudan,
Lebanon now.
Lebanon now,
Terrible.
Iran. Like those are all the hot countries that we track. But at the same time, we're also tracking different countries around the world in just their general economic trends. So
Mhm.
like I was mainly focusing on India and Pakistan, like Southeast Asia.
Mhm.
And a lot of the work was basically writing research briefs, um, scouring through local news and academic journals,
Mhm.
figuring out what academics in India are saying about the economy, and essentially creating like booklets filled with information on the countries that we were looking at. And
Amazing.
like a more fun part of the research project is managing his Twitter. So
Okay.
running his Twitter on a day-to-day basis, it's a very Trumpian approach of getting research out to the masses. So that's
Didn't you have a post that was retweeted by a government official?
yeah. There was a few. So like I wrote a tweet and it was retweeted by like a minister in Pakistan. Another tweet that we wrote that was retweeted by Ted Cruz over here in the U.S. So
Wow.
a lot of prominent people uh, are following him on his Twitter. He gets into fights a lot with AOC, if you're familiar with her.
I am, yes. Could you explain who AOC is for our attendees who may not be
Um,
familiar with her?
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's a freshman congresswoman from
Mhm.
New York. She's a part of the Democratic Party of their progressive wing. So um, Professor Hankey, one of his tweets got retweeted by her. She did not have like nice things to say, unfortunately, but um,
But you
it's
kept it civil in the response, I'm sure.
of course. That's like the main priority that we've tried to follow on Twitter. We
That's
don't try to follow. We definitely do follow it. Like
yeah, good,
we're
good.
representing an academic, so we have to keep it very civil, very courteous, and
Yeah,
just based on the facts.
awesome. Yeah, data is something that should be absolute, right? And obviously, as a
Exactly.
researcher, you deal with data. Wonderful. I just want to ask all our attendees, if any of you have questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A box at the bottom. This discussion is not focused on admissions, although we're happy to answer questions on admissions. This is more focused on the student experience in the US as an international student. Another question on that point, Shehryar. You are Pakistani, you come from the Middle East, you're Muslim, right?
Correct.
There is this, I don't want to call it a misperception, there is this, kind of image in many people's heads that when you go to the States, it may potentially be hostile, right, to students like you. What was your personal experience? What did you find on campus and in your interactions, let's say, outside of campus over the last four
Sure.
years?
Well, I've had a single instance where I've been discriminated against or felt threatened in any sort of way, whether it's been on campus or even off campus. I've driven through rural Maryland where I've seen a lot of like Trump flags, and even there I haven't experienced anything. Like one going to the store, like it's all been very civil, very courteous, and there are like a lot of Muslim communities on campus that make students feel welcomed, make them feel a part of something that they would have been at home.
Mhm.
Um, the like a lot of international students form groups. They also look out for each other.
Mhm.
But even at the same time, like my American peers have been nothing but very generous to me. they've been like all my best friends are American. The issue of race or religion has never been a part of our conversations. It's it's always been it's as if I was in Dubai College. It's always been like just that human to human interaction.
Incredible.
It transcends race and religion, in my opinion.
That's amazing, and that's so encouraging to hear it directly from your mouth, right? From your experiences, because again, there's this image that, oh, especially the last 4 years, America is becoming incredibly hostile to any kind of minority groups. I experienced the same at Hopkins, and what I thought was incredible is that even amongst my so-called American friends, right? I'm American, right? But I'm a
Correct.
hyphenated American. I'm a Greek American, right? My parents came from Greece. My best friends, one was Armenian American, another guy was Egyptian Coptic American, another guy Iraqi American, another guy Indian American. One of our mutual friends, Dan Adut, Persian Jewish American, right? So
Right.
even there's so much diversity even within the American community beyond just the 15 or 18% of international students there.
Correct. Yeah, that's like very similar to my experience as well. Like almost all my friends are hyphenated Americans. So
And what I think is interesting about you, because we've kept in touch over the last 4 years, is you, lots of international students kind of, I think, not all of them, but many, kind of just like go into this tribal mode where they cluster together, particularly if there are a lot of them, right?
yeah,
Uh,
correct.
Chinese students, the Indian students, and they don't like fully kind of integrate themselves socially into
Correct.
campus life. Did you, one, did you see that? And two, how did you kind of transcend that and not be put in a little box that maybe obviously you didn't want to be placed in?
Correct. So like I feel like for some people those sort of groups are like do serve a purpose and are like do have a positive impact on them. But for me personally, like although I'm Pakistani, I don't have like that same level of attachment to my country considering I grew up in Dubai around people from all over the world.
Mhm.
So coming to the US, I sort of felt like those sort of organizations were not something that I could personally relate to that much.
Mhm.
So the way I sort of made friends was just the way any other student would make friends or be a part of um, campus life. It's by joining other groups that match with your interests,
Mhm.
integrating on campus in different ways that sort of go beyond whether you're Pakistani, Indian, or Chinese.
Mhm.
Um, that was sort
And
of
what
my
are some of
approach.
those groups that you kind of joined? With their social organizations,
Yeah.
sport? Yeah.
So I joined like I joined a bunch of organizations when I first started. I was a part of the rugby team. I was a part of the JHU Politic, which is a uh, an on-campus magazine.
Mhm.
I also joined a social fraternity on campus
Mhm.
where I met most of my friends. So those groups were a key stepping stone for me to integrate onto campus life.
Incredible, wonderful, and I think enriched your campus experience, not
Oh,
just that. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's what made Hopkins like special in a way. It's not just the classes; it's the bridges you form with the people on campus. It's the cultural exchange, which is equally as important, I'd say.
And then that's again, I think, breaking down another stereotype where Hopkins, known as a pre-med factory. How many times have you been asked, "Oh, so you're a doctor?" How many times were you asked that question?
Too many to count at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So people think that Hopkins is just about a bunch of pre-meds who are studying for their orgo finals all the time, right? The orgo midterms, um, but and extremely rigorous academically. But that wasn't your experience there. You weren't pre-med, first of all, but it doesn't sound like socially as well that you had that kind of pressure put on you to constantly kind of get ahead even at other student success.
Yeah, correct. I like not being a pre-med is definitely like a help in that way, in the sense like you're not under that much scrutiny.
Mhm.
But like in general, Hopkins is not a hostile environment. like that people paint it out to be. It's a very collaborative environment, even amongst my pre-med students who were getting into the groove of the MCAT this past year. They weren't trying to short each other. They were like studying together. They were um, like collaborating. It's an environment where people are like working to similar end goals, and you therefore need people to help you out in that journey. So um, I wouldn't characterize it as hostile.
If you go online to some of these crazy, websites that the kids post the anonymous reviews to, right?
Right.
Niche and others. I had a student who was accepted to Hopkins and other universities, selected USC, and one of the reasons she did that was just that she had read so much scary stuff online about the campus culture there. What do you think? Your experience was not really what was portrayed or what is regularly portrayed online.
Right.
Who goes on these websites and writes these, crazy things, and why do you think students maybe should stay away from those sources of information?
Generally, like I feel like this is a rule for life. The vocal majority is the one that's like always heard, and like it's the silent majority that holds.
Mhm.
I'd say most people at Hopkins are the silent majority, i.e., the very nice, very welcoming, very collaborative students on the same journey.
Mhm.
But people who are very vocal, they're the ones posting on the forums. So people who have something to say, I don't think they're a majority at all. Um,
So watch out, guys. If your primary source of information on universities, the forums, beware. Yeah, probably not a good source of
yeah,
information.
the internet is not real life, unfortunately.
Fortunately, thank God, because
Fortunately.
yeah, it's crazy what some of these pictures being painted look like. Another, again, I love top best thing that ever happened to me aside from my marriage and my kids. Another kind of misconception I get is that Baltimore is like people watch The Wire, right?
Yeah.
And they think it's just all like that. So what were you expecting from Baltimore, the city, and kind of what did you find?
When I was expecting Baltimore, the city, I read that it has a higher murder rate than Fallujah, and that sort of set alarm bells off.
Yes,
When I got to Baltimore, set more alarm bells off. I was
yes,
like, where am I? Where am I right now?
yes,
But like once you get onto campus, you sort of realize that okay, Baltimore is like any other city. There are good parts, there are
yes,
bad parts.
yes,
And like when you're walking around Baltimore, you're generally in the Hopkins bubble, as they call it.
yeah,
So that bubble is very safe. Like nothing tends to happen in that bubble.
yeah,
But even still, you have to be smart as you would be in any other city that you're walking
yeah,
in. But over the 4 years, I did explore Baltimore. I went very far off campus. I went to like downtown, like the different neighborhoods in Baltimore, explored there.
yeah,
And Baltimore is like it's a safe city.
yeah,
It's if you're smart, if you're proactive, if you're not being silly,
yeah.
you have very little to worry about.
Yeah, and you said
Just like
something there, like not being silly. And that's the thing. A lot of students I see, wherever it is, Boston, Baltimore, wherever, if they place themselves in situations of their own making, right?
yeah,
Right, you know what I'm talking about. Then, of course, bad things, there's a greater likelihood of bad things to happen if they take crazy risks.
yeah. Like if you're going out somewhere, go with a group of people. Don't go on your own. Like this is like standard advice for any city you're in.
Yeah,
Um, there are some neighborhoods which you don't go to at
that's
like
it.
certain hours. Like
Absolutely.
you're mitigating risks to keep yourself safe, and if you mitigate those risks, you have very little to worry about.
Agreed. Agreed. I can't agree more. Very, very well said. Very well placed. Very good. Excellent. When we look back now, obviously we talked about, the new ICE directive, COVID, another big elephant in the room. Take us through, how COVID impacted you as a student, obviously your graduation, your studies, and how it impacted you as a human being as well.
Sure. Um, so like I remember the week where everything was blowing up and like all our classes were basically getting canceled. Our professor, like the week before, he took a poll of the class there's like around 10 people in this class, and he asked, how many of you guys think we'll be back after spring break? Uh, and like everyone said, yes, we'll be back. Like this will blow over. And then the next week, the day before classes were canceled, he asked the same question, and everyone's hands were going down.
Yeah.
Like people thought we wouldn't return. And in that week, we had online instruction, like go live, and after spring break, it was all remote online instruction. I personally thought the transition was very smooth. What the university did, they should have done, I guess. Our grades became pass fail. I thought they could have stayed like normal. I think we could have received a letter grade, but I understand why they chose to go pass fail, considering it was like such an uncertain time. But like the way it impacted me, I personally try not to think too much about these things. Like the way I try to look at it is like, I'm here to do X, and I will do whatever I can to accomplish this task. So my goal at that time was do these classes and do these assignments. This is the situation I'm in right now. So like, why worry about something that's not in my control?
Exactly.
Focus on things which are in your control, and if you can do that, you don't have to worry about anything, because everything else yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. And let me ask you though, for the pre-meds, the ones who are in lab courses, right?
Right. Yeah.
What happened to them?
I think labs got canceled. Like if I'm remembering correctly, labs were obviously like, I think recorded or something. Like professors would just show what they were doing in the lab. It was things like that, but people weren't physically in labs. They're going back to labs now. I know a bunch of like I know some friends who are part of the applied physics laboratory.
Yes.
That never closed. People were still going in.
Wow.
I think I'm saying that correctly. As far as I remember, that never closed.
Very interesting. Super cool. Very good. Very encouraging too that the research must go on. Very cool. I think, again, another thing students don't really think about, like high school students when they're researching universities, is, you know, campus culture, but also traditions, right?
Right.
And tell us a little bit about the Hopkins traditions that you enjoyed most, because there are quite a few good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, this year my favorite one was canceled, and that was Spring Fair. That's, as the name suggests, it's a fair in spring. It's where you get like a lot of stalls of vendors all over Baltimore congregating in Hopkins. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of like fair rides, a lot of activities. It's just like a very upbeat, happy time on campus. Then there's this thing called lighting up the quads, which is in the fall semester. It's before Christmas, they turn on all these lights and do fireworks on one of the quads on campus. There's also the lacrosse rivalry with Loyola University. Loyola is like right across the street from Hopkins on Charles Street. So it's called the battle for Charles Street right now. So you have like a lacrosse game between Hopkins and Loyola, and like that game is very fun to go to. Trying to think. I think like those are the main traditions that I've experienced at Hopkins.
When's the first time you remember hearing the word lacrosse and then trying to figure out what it was?
Oh, lacrosse. I think I was like watching a TV show in high school. And like that's where I first found out what lacrosse was, and then I looked it up and I was like, wow, this is like a bizarre sport.
Explain lacrosse for everybody who don't know what it is.
Yeah, lacrosse is like it's like field hockey, but instead of like the ball being on the ground, they toss the ball with like sticks with it's a stick with a basket in it.
Yes.
And you sort of like pass it around, and like your goal is to score more goals than the other team, like soccer, like field hockey, but it's a more physical, more violent game.
A lot of checking, a lot of, again, there's a lot of cross-checking, a lot of, you know, definitely a contact sport.
Yeah, exactly. It's like hockey, but in the air and with some more contact.
And it's wonderful to watch live.
Oh, yeah.
And
Live is
lots
a
of
different
goals.
experience.
And
Yeah,
there's a lot of goals. It's exciting.
yeah, that's something with a lot of American sports. The scoring is it's very fast paced. So
Very.
same with lacrosse.
And Hopkins is one trivia question. I'm going to put you on the spot here. How many national championships have we won?
Oh dear, 14? Am I right?
I don't know, but that sounds like a good guess.
Okay, all right.
but no, that was a big part of the tradition there, and that was a big part of campus life. And obviously, and I remember the really big game was against Maryland, even more than
Uh,
Loyola. They were
right,
always better, but Hopkins consistently ranks in the top 5 or the top 10, every single year. That's
correct.
also what they're known for in the States. Very cool. Excellent. Now, so you graduated. You didn't have a chance to did they mail it to you? Did they mail the degree to you?
Yeah, I got my diploma 2 weeks ago, so I've got it in person.
Congrats.
Thank you
Congrats.
so
Not quite
much.
the same as getting a handshake from one of the
Yeah,
deans, right, and posing for the photo. But
yeah,
you also decided to continue your studies.
correct, correct. So I'm going to be pursuing a master's at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and I'll be concentrating in international economics with finance and a concentration in energy, resources, and environment. And it's a 2 years program. Um, yeah.
And why did you choose that specific program?
So Hopkins, like SICE, they force you to take the international economics requirement, and that's something I thought was a differentiator between, let's say, like the Kennedy School or Georgetown.
Mhm.
Um, Hopkins has like uh, a big focus on the quantitative requirement, and that was something I felt like that I needed coming out of undergrad. So I thought the natural choice would be to go for SICE. Um, and like the concentrations that SICE offered were the ones that I was most interested in, and the one that I ended up choosing was energy, and that was like something unique to SICE.
Very cool. And where do you see yourself this coming summer, right? So after your first year of study, in terms of internships, and then where do you
Right.
see yourself professionally afterwards?
So like the current goal right now is to go into energy consulting,
Mhm.
or going into like a role at the World Bank that focuses on energy, um, or international economics. Like I'm aware that the World Bank has like an energy group that does a lot of work. So those are like the internships and the uh, future jobs that I'm looking at.
Great. And for you, obviously, the undergraduate campus, right, the Homewood campus at Hopkins in Baltimore, but now you're in the heart of DC, right?
Correct.
The School of Advanced International Studies is in the heart of DC. So tell us again, like, too many times students look at a university maybe without understanding its broader environment. How does SICE's location impact your experience when it comes to everything, jobs, kind of additional enrichment opportunities, quality of life, access?
Yeah, so like SICE is located in Washington, D.C. in DuPont Circle. And DuPont Circle is the heart of international studies, of politics, of think tanks, like all these institutions such as the Brookings Institution, the Carnegie Endowment for World Peace, the Cato Institute, all these embassies, they're all located in DuPont Circle, right next to SICE. SICE is just one of the buildings surrounded by embassies, think tanks, um, and a bunch of other organizations. So, like, that's one of the reasons why I chose SICE. It's in the heart of all the things that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
It's in it's in Washington D.C., which is it's a big city where a lot of firms are also located.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of consulting firms do also come to SICE to network. So just being in,
To recruit as well, right?
yeah, exactly. Like your top consulting firms also come into SICE.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like a much better option uh, in my head, because like it related to all the things that I was interested in.
Very good. If we go back a little bit now towards, let's say, the beginning of our conversation, if we hit the rewind
Mhm.
button, you were at a British curriculum school, right?
Correct.
Studying A levels. But from what I remember, you were always very clear on wanting to go to the US, that the UK really wasn't even
Yeah.
consideration for you. Why? And why? And are you happy with your experience and your decision?
Sure. Like there's many reasons why I prefer the US to the UK. The first and foremost thing was that the US gives you a lot more flexibility in the UK than the UK. You really have like the opportunity to create a bigger niche for yourself than
Mhm,
you would in the UK.
mhm,
Um, like at Hopkins, even though I was an international studies major, all my courses were very different to one of my friends' courses. I took a bunch of economics courses while his were primarily filled with courses on Chinese, like on China.
mhm, mhm,
So even within your degree, you have like the opportunity to um, create your own focus on what you want to study.
mhm.
Second thing is, I felt like the American universities offer more opportunities to integrate into the culture directly.
Interesting.
Like campus life on American universities tends to be more robust and more fulfilling
Mhm,
than British universities. So like
mhm,
that was something I wanted, and that's why um, like I was dead set on the US.
mhm. Any regrets?
Any regrets? Absolutely not. I do not live alone.
Encouraging. You look happy. You're still on this
Yeah,
journey. You didn't go to the UK even for your master's degree. One last question about integrating. I like that. Do you feel that it would have been different to integrate in the UK? Of course, this is conjecture, right?
sure.
But is there anything unique about the US in terms of an international student being able to integrate into all facets of student life?
Sure. When I say integrate, I sort of mean that campus culture is far more alive from what I could tell in the US than in the UK.
Mhm.
And based on like conversations that I have with my friends in the UK, they're not as attached to their campus as people are in the US. Like, uh, like Hopkins is a source of pride for me. And like that's only because of um, how Hopkins makes you feel once you're on campus.
Amazing.
Um, like everything that revolves around your life is related to Hopkins. So naturally, it becomes sort of like a second home for you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. No, and I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you, and I can't wait to go back. It would have been my 20-year reunion, and I was looking forward to all of our friends were coming from all corners of the globe. But I'll be there next year, and I hope you will be there as well, so we
Yeah,
can celebrate
absolutely,
together. It's
absolutely.
incredible. It's incredible to go back now and see students like yourself, who are there or who have graduated to reconnect. And it's such a special place, I think, for both of us, and so impactful in making us the individuals we are today. And it's so great to see you again. I want to ask if there are any questions. Please feel free to pop in the Q&A now, and we'll be happy to address them. Um, if not, that's also not a problem. But Shehryar, last question that I have for you. What advice do you have for a high school student that is entering his second year of A levels that maybe is, in addition to the normal anxiety about going through this process, right? They have to deal with COVID, they have to deal with this ICE pronouncement, they have to deal with all of these things. What do you say to them?
What do I say to them? I guess like the basic thing is like look at what's in your control. What like you have all your grades, you have your test scores. The main thing that you can control right now is your essays, I'd imagine. So focus on those. Make sure like those things are the best they can be. Um, do not worry about the politics behind all this ICE stuff. The COVID stuff is something that's impacting not just the US, it's all over the world. There's still no cure, there's no vaccine. Um, so not much has changed from when everything started.
Mhm.
Um, but there are ways that people can be smart, proactive to mitigate these risks.
Yes.
Um, and that's what people on campus are doing. That's what people in the US are also doing.
Mhm.
Um, so like as like a high school student applying right now, I would say there's honestly not much to worry about that's in your control.
Mhm.
All you can truly worry about is what is in your control. And if you're mastering those things and making them the best that they can be,
Yeah.
you like I would not be worried at all. Like
Yeah. Channel that maybe anxiety into productive and
exactly.
like preparing for your SATs, yeah?
Exactly.
Taking an online course,
Yeah,
learning how to play a new instrument or speaking a new language, right? Um,
exactly.
so, and it's great to hear, because if I tell students, parents, don't be concerned, things will resolve themselves in regards to this ICE, edict, right? It's one thing, but you're there, you're on the ground, you're living it.
Hmm.
And you also
Correct.
have faith in it sounds like you have faith both in the institutions, the universities, and the government, meaning the court systems there.
Correct. Yeah. And
Incredible.
like universities are not silent about this. Like international students comprise like 5% of the entire U.S. student population.
Mhm.
Um, International students contribute just as much to the economy as other students, if not more.
Yes,
Um, International students pay more tuition fees than American
yes.
counterparts. Like this is not something that American universities can afford to let happen, essentially.
90% of American students in universities are on some form of aid. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
American students subsidize, I'm sorry, international students subsidize the education costs of those American students, because typically they pay full tuition. And
Exactly.
the many state schools that would just close their doors completely, they're completely dependent on international students if they were to disappear. And I'm sure that the institutions, leaders, individuals, everybody is going to do whatever they can to make sure that international students continue to feel welcome in the
Yeah.
U.S. And it's encouraging again to hear that you feel that way as well. And I really thank you, Shehryar. It's been amazing to catch up with you so comprehensively.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Am I going to see you next in Dubai or in the States? Are you coming here or I'm going there?
I think I can't really move right now. I'm like, if I leave, I can't come back in. So,
Yeah, not a good idea. I'll be there hopefully in January, once we get through this application cycle.
knock on wood, knock on wood.
Catch up in person, face to face, not over this.
Absolutely.
Okay, my friend, take care. Keep doing great
You
things.
too. Take it easy, Peter. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Bye bye.
See you.